Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Eat Well, Live Well. Your presenter is Nicola Graham and my name is Annie Sasson and I'll be your facilitator. I'd like to introduce you to our facilitator, to our presenter rather, I beg your pardon, who is now putting on her webcam so you can see her lovely face. So there's Nicola there. So Nick is a health educator with 2 decades of experience. She has corporate experience as the international training manager for Nokia and as the director and founder of Health at Work, a corporate health company. Nicola has worked at Monash University since 2002, delivering the mindfulness program to medical students. In 2015, Nicola collaborated with MS to develop the Eat Well, Live Well project, and Nicola is currently the Health Professional Education Coordinator here at MS Limited. So I'll now hand over to Nick.
Thank you very much, Annie, and I'll just get my slides up I'll just share my screen with you.
No worries, we can see your screen. Thank you, Nick.
Wonderful. So welcome everybody, and thank you very much, Annie, for having me here today to do the Eat Well, Live Well webinar. We know that when a person is diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, over 40% of people will make some dietary changes. So the aim of today's webinar is to provide you with some really good information if you are thinking about making those changes, and maybe reinforce some good choices that you have made if you've already made changes to your diet. So we know that lifestyle and health promotion is a part of the jigsaw in the treatment and management of MS, and it's just a part. Obviously your disease modifying therapies, your neurologist, your health professional and allied health professional team is all a part of your treatment and management. So I'm really pleased to be sharing this information with you today, and I hope you'll get a lot out of it. Making changes, as I say, is part of the jigsaw of management and treatment of MS. Other lifestyle changes we've got covered in this essentials model that might include, or I would strongly encourage that it does include exercise and connecting and stress management, etc. And so we're going to focus on eating well and living well today. So as we mentioned, for many people with MS, making a positive change to your diet is a really important way of regaining some control and improving quality of life when you're living with an unpredictable and a chronic health condition. It can be, for many people, really empowering. The side effects are positive. You tend to have more energy. Your blood markers like cholesterol and triglycerides, etc., will improve. And positive dietary changes can definitely help you manage symptoms such as constipation, as fatigue, weight fluctuations. I really do want to say very clearly, though, that before you make any significant changes to your diet, please speak to your GP and or dietitian to make sure you're getting all the nutrients you need. We're all different. There's not a one diet fits all, and you've all got very specific situations. So I really encourage you to get professional advice. As we mentioned, 40% of people with MS do change their diet. This is a bit of a snapshot of what sort of changes people make. So most people are increasing their fruit and veggies. Some people are looking at different fats, how they're going to use those. Many people are reducing their discretionary foods, etc. So you can see some of the changes that people make. Way back, Hippocrates, the father of medicine, said, let food be your medicine and medicine be your food. So in the West, we've tended to think of food as a pleasure, as an emotional pleasure, as a way of socially connecting, which is a beautiful aspect of food. But there's another aspect around it being your medicine, about thinking what's going to really serve your body. How can you eat really nutrient-dense meals? And this is what we're going to be focusing on today. And I love this miserable man's face as he looks at his wheat-free, dairy-free, fat-free, nut-free, sugar-free and salt-free cake. And we tend to think, or we have in the past thought, that eating healthily is going to be utterly miserable, but that absolutely does not have to be the case. There is so much beautiful, tasty, healthy food out there. A study here by Fitzgerald that very directly correlated diet quality with disability and symptom severity in MS. Again, I want to stress here that when we're looking at studies with diet, they're predominantly observational studies, not intervention studies. So they're not gold standard. They're more what we've observed. Diet studies are inherently difficult to carry out, as you can imagine, and we're often not compliant. So, getting a large group of compliant people can be tricky, amongst other issues. So we need to apply good common sense with diet and appreciate that the dietary information we give is what is currently best practice, but nutritional information, as you know, is often changing and information is often conflicting. So it's navigating a careful path through there, and I hope we'll give you quite a balanced view today. And this study here about lipids looked at the levels of fat in the blood, so that's things like triglycerides and your cholesterols, and looked at the correlation with genetics and found that there was an unhealthy lipid profile was associated with increased disability. So perhaps managing cholesterol and triglycerides and managing the fats in our diet may help. So I want to just start by establishing a baseline. What is a healthy, what's considered predominantly by the Australian Dietary Guidelines as a healthy diet. So what we want to see, as we've got on this plate here, is half your plate with fantastic veggies. So in this case it's a salad, but we want a range of colours, and a range of different colours, or a rainbow of colours, gives us different nutrients. So orange colours and yellows and reds give us great beta carotenes, for example, and the reds in tomatoes help with providing lycopene, and the greens have chlorophyll. So different colours provide us with different nutrients. So we want a rainbow on our plate. We want, when we're having protein, really good quality protein. So if you're eating meat, great grass-fed meat. I always feel odd saying that our meat should eat grass, which is what they were born to eat, but we preferably don't want them having been fed with some of the weird food booster pellets that some animals are reared on. So we want as natural as possible, because that gives us a great fat or lipid profile in the meat. Beautiful source of protein is some good quality fish. So we want really nice quality protein. Okay. So if we think about diet in terms of traffic lights, and I also like to think about diet as a way of eating on a day-to-day basis. So diet sometimes feels like something you do for a while and then you stop. I like to think of what's an approach that's going to work for me day in, day out, with occasional I was going to say lapses, but that's not a good word, with occasional beautiful indulgences for birthdays and celebrations and so forth, occasional treats. So thinking about a way that we can eat on a day-to-day basis. So green light, plenty of fruit and vegetables, whole grain cereals, and lots of great omega-3s, which are unsaturated fats, such as flaxseed oil, fish, walnuts, for example. Our amber lights would be around having a moderate amount of protein, and that would be unprocessed meat, eggs, legumes, tofu, having nuts and seeds, and if you're having dairy in your diet, having good quality natural yogurts. So that would be our moderation. And then our red lights might be around saturated fat, so really minimizing and limiting cream, butter, milk, cheese, processed meats, which are things like salami and sausages and burgers, limiting the trans fats that we find in biscuits and cakes and pastries, and of course the sugars, and ice creams and desserts. So limiting sugar, so that's our cordial and our energy drinks and sweets, and limiting salt or avoiding where we can. So processed meats, that includes bacon, ham, sausages, salamis, etc. Studies have shown that it's preferable that we avoid these altogether. So I want to just talk a little bit about fats, because that does crop up a lot when we start to look at multiple sclerosis specific diets. So I just want to get a bit of terminology and clear. So we refer to saturated fats, and saturated fats mean that it's simplified, but that the fat molecule contains the maximum amount of hydrogen that it can have. So the molecule is saturated with hydrogen. So saturated fats are animal fats. Typically, they're solid or hard at room temperature. So we're thinking meat and cheese and milk and yogurt and cream and coconut milk and palm oil. They'd be example of saturated fats. Unsaturated fats, so the molecule does not have the maximum amount of hydrogen that it could have, so it's unsaturated. They're essential, so your body cannot make them. And they've been associated with, so not proven, but associated with an improved quality of life, with lower cholesterol, and with reduced disease activity for people with MS. And they help to modulate immunity, so to balance immunity. And very importantly, they lower inflammation. We know that there's quite a large component of MS is associated with inflammation. So we're really interested in omega-3s, and they are typically in walnuts and sardines and mackerels and fatty fish and flaxseed oil. They're delicate, so they can go rancid. So they need to be cold pressed, kept in your fridge, not heated, and no sunlight. So here's some flax seeds, a picture of some flax seeds. If you ate them like that, and I've just had a slice of toast with flax seeds on it, just like that, you're not going to get much out of them. It's going to pass straight through your body. So what we need to do is have a flaxseed oil or grind the flax seeds up. And in that way, we're going to be able to get the nutrients out of them. Another example of omega-3s, as I mentioned, is good quality salmon, fish. Omega-6 is another type of unsaturated fat. We do not want too much omega-6. We tend to, in a Western diet, have a bit too much. So we're generally not trying to get any more omega-6 into our diet. We've generally got enough. But avocados are a great source of omega-6. They have got some omega-3s in as well. And we're interested in avocados because they've got a rich source of oleic acid, and oleic acid is very rich in the myelin sheath. So we quite like including avocado in our diet. And the best part of the avocado is the dark green bit right next to the skin. So you've really got to scrape those avocados out. Eggs are a brilliant source of bioavailable protein, which means our body finds it very easy to use eggs as a source of protein. They also have a great source of acetylcholine, and that is a neurotransmitter that's required for brain and muscle function. Now, some people choose not to have eggs, no evidence for or against them in an MS diet, but just flagging, some people choose not to. As I mentioned, we do want to look after our omega-3 unsaturated fats. So I'd like to now just talk about a few fantastic anti-inflammatory foods that you might like to include in your diet, because we really like to promote an anti-inflammatory diet. For example, the Mediterranean diet would be a good example of a good anti-inflammatory diet. So here's a close-up of an orange, especially orange peel. It's got lots of what we call flavones, which have wonderful anti-inflammatory action. They also have anti-cancer action, so that's great. So getting some good citrus in your diet, I would strongly encourage that you eat whole fruit, not fruit juice. There's too much natural sugar in fruit juices. So eating the whole fruit, then you get all the benefits and the fiber as well. And I like to use the zest in my cooking. So I put peel into my diet wherever I can. So for example, in a tuna dish, I'll zest the lemon zest in there. And one of my treats is a lovely cheesecake, and I put some lime peel on the top of a sort of a blueberry cherry cheesecake. So there's lots of lovely ways we can use zest as well. This is a close-up of broccoli florets. It's from what we call the cruciferous vegetable family, and you can see they've got crosses on them, and hence the name. And what's wonderful about broccoli, it's got a very strong antioxidant in it called sulforaphane. And when we eat lightly cooked broccoli, when we chew it and break down the cells and it mixes with our saliva, then that's when sulforaphane starts to be produced, which is really powerful antioxidant in our body. So we love broccoli, but not the awful stuff that your grandmother used to serve you, where it was cooked within an inch of its life and served up limp and dead on your plate, but just something that is very lightly steamed and cooked. We love garlic. Garlic has been shown to have some nice immune boosting functions, which at the moment we're all wanting to look after our immunity. So having lots of great garlic. And I guess now we're socially or physically isolating, we can eat a lot more garlic without offending our friends and neighbours. So garlic is a really nice antioxidant and anti-inflammatory as well, as is pomegranate, and it's got a constituent in it called punic allergen. And this was discovered by the University of Huddersfield as having a strong anti-inflammatory action in the brain. So there's further research going in to see if we can develop a drug with this particular constituent in it. Another wonderful anti-inflammatory food is salmon, as we've mentioned, and turmeric. So here in Melbourne, we can, when the cafes were open, we could get a golden latte, or you can buy a mix of turmeric, often with ginger and black pepper. And black pepper actually potentiates the action of the turmeric, and it has a lovely antibiotic and anti-inflammatory action. So I make a really nice dal with coconut milk and lentils and turmeric and onion and garlic, really easy. Pop it on your scrambled eggs if you're eating eggs. It's lovely on roasted cauliflower. So however you can get the turmeric in. SCFAS, short chain fatty acids. So they have they act as a source of energy for the cells in our colon, in our bowel, and they also help to produce a type of T cell, which is part of your immunity, called the regulatory T cells. And these T cells have a particular anti-inflammatory action. So artichokes, leeks, garlic, onions, bananas, asparagus, apples, carrots, oranges, legumes are all wonderful sources of short chain fatty acids. Annie, I just want to pause and just see if anybody's got any questions or comments at this time.
Thanks, Nick. No, there's no questions that have come through at this stage.
Great. I hope I'm not going too fast or bamboozling anybody, so we'll just carry on, but please do feel free to type in any questions in the box and I will endeavour to answer them. So
Thanks,
this
Nick.
is a lovely picture of some of our MS Connect crew drinking a golden latte. They all said that it would taste disgusting, so I made them all one and they absolutely loved it, as you can tell. This table here starts to show us some of the different MS diets. So some of the well-known MS specific diets are SWANK, the Overcoming MS, the MacDougall, the Terry Walls, and then of course we've got the Australian Dietary Guidelines. And what I want to point out is that all of these diets are saying, please increase your fruit and vegetables. So get that rainbow colour of variety of vegetables on your plate as much as you can. And I'll be the first to admit, you need to make an effort to do this. It doesn't happen without planning. You need to plan. So for me, I make a big batch of minestrone soup and I sneak, spinach and carrots and as much veggies as I can into a plethora of dishes. So tonight, for example, I'm doing a quinoa salad, but I'll get as many vegetables chopped up into that as I possibly can. So you need to have a few good staples. And my other good staple, as I mentioned, is the minestrone soup, because I can get heaps of veggies into that. Most of them are recommending whole grains and legumes, and all of them are saying no to processed meat. Okay. I'm not going to go through the different diets. It's very personal, the decision that you make as to if you want to follow a diet, if it fits your financial commitment, what resonates with you, and what your doctor, taking into account your personal medical history, thinks might be suitable for you. So you've got to do something that is achievable and realistic for you, and that makes you feel good and is aligned with your values. So I hope you'll get some great information today to help with that. And here's some strategies, just some really simple swaps that you can do that will help you to get more nutrients into your diet. So for example, white rice, simply replace that with wild rice or brown rice. You're going to get heaps more minerals and more multi-B vitamins in doing that. Get rid of your white bread. There's no place for it. And put instead you can get some beautiful whole grain, whole seed, wholemeal breads. And I've actually started baking some of my own bread. I must admit, so far it's worked out more like damper than bread, but it's a work in progress. And then
Nick, if
swapping
I
out.
can interrupt for a second, I've just got a couple of questions that have come through.
Yeah.
So Anne is asking the question, well, she's stating that she uses protein light milk, and is this better for her than full cream milk?
I don't think there's a definitive answer for that, Anne. So I tend to use sparingly full cream milk, but I can understand why you might want to reduce your amount of saturated fats, in which case having light milk will give you less saturated fats. What I like to do actually in the milk department, and this is just my personal preference, not based on any evidence or studies, but if you look in my cupboard or fridge, I've got a variety of different milks there. So I'll have soy, rice, and almond, for example, and some normal milk that I just use for my tea. So I like to spread it around and use some milk alternatives, and then just have a little bit of cow's milk for occasional use. That's my personal take on it. I do understand that you might like to use a light milk, it's less saturated fat, but there's no particular evidence position on that, Anne.
Okay, great. Thank you, Nick. Marianne is asking, is bulletproof coffee okay? And I must confess, I had to look up what bulletproof coffee was.
And what is it, Annie? Because I've not heard of it.
Okay, so it says here that it's a drink consisting of brewed coffee, grass-fed unsalted butter, and medium-chain triglyceride, MCT, coconut milk. Bulletproof coffee is most popular with people with following a high-fat, low-carb diet.
Okay. Look, it sounds okay. Again, there's no evidence one way or another if that's okay or not okay. So it's got coconut milk in it. Coconut milk is a saturated fat. So if you're trying to reduce your saturated fats, you're inherently going to be reducing your coconut milk. Coconut milk also has some anti-cancer properties, so it's not, there's some benefits of coconut milk, but it is a fairly rich source of saturated fat. Coffee, I like to use coffee medicinally in terms of waking me up and when I need a bit of a stimulant, but I find it a bit too anxiety producing and a bit too stimulating on my gut, and it is dehydrating. So if you're drinking your coffee, remember to add water with it. So again, I've got no particular position on bulletproof coffee, just be mindful that it's got coconut milk in it.
Okay, great, Nick. And we've got a few more questions come through. Are you happy to take some more questions now, Nick?
Let's take a couple more and then we'll press on and then we'll do some more.
Great. All right. So Betty is asking what rice is low GI, or which rice is low GI?
Yeah, so that's nice and easy one, Betty. So thank you very much for sending that one through. So brown rice would be your low GI. Slower to cook, but it's got more minerals in it, and your white rice is a high GI. And GI meaning glycemic index, how quickly your blood sugar raises. So white rice, your blood sugar will spike quickly and fall quickly. Brown rice will give you a slower increase in blood sugar and more steady. And in fact, brown rice used to be used to help bring people off LSD. So as they were coming down, it's considered very grounding. So because of that low GI.
Oh, that's very interesting. All right. Thank you, Nick. There's a few more questions, but I'll save them till a bit later.
Okay, beautiful. So some simple swaps here is get rid of your margarine. It's generally been produced with chemicals and in a high heat environment. And I would encourage you instead to use beautiful flaxseed oil, which has got a lovely nutty taste, or some avocado, or I do use some butter, but I use it very sparingly and very occasionally. So it's a part of the small amount of saturated fat that's in my diet. I would swap out your processed meat for much healthier. And when I say this, I like to acknowledge that we all love processed meat, salami, etc. It's beautiful. And I think if we were having processed meats that didn't have all the nitrates added to it and so forth, all the associated carcinogens, so we had it in the more traditional way that it was produced, it wouldn't be so much of an issue. But our modern environment, I would cut out the processed meats and replace with tofu and good fish and beautiful cuts of healthy grass-fed meat and flaxseed. Getting rid of your Coca-Cola, high sugar, high caffeine, replacing it with green tea, which is strongly anti-inflammatory, water, really nice smoothies. Again, they're not encouraging you to have fruit drinks, fruit juices, but to have more vegetable based juices if you are, and to have the whole fiber with it as well. Sugar is very addictive. We're programmed to enjoy sweet things. So whatever you have to do to cut the sugar out, for me, it means not buying it in the first place. When I've got that chocolate surge, if it's not in the house, then it's easy not to eat it. If it's in the house, rest assured it will be eaten. So whatever strategies you do to reduce your sugar, for me it's baking, so I don't tend to bake cakes because if I bake them, I eat them. So whatever it takes to reduce the sugar. Excuse me. We don't like sugar because it does have an inflammatory action in the body. So it promotes inflammation. It's also uses nutrients to be metabolized, particularly B vitamins, and it doesn't provide any nutrients. So it saps nutrients out of your body. Excuse me, I'm just going to have a drink of my green tea. Okay. And so then just some tips for success, because I'd like to acknowledge that if it was super easy, for us all to change our diet and be on a perfectly healthy, wonderful diet, we'd probably all be doing it. And for some people, it's easier than others. Some of the tips that I would suggest is just adopting a great attitude, being kind to yourself, being goal-driven about the changes you want to make, but adopting a kind and compassionate approach with it. Getting educated like you are today about what are great things to do. Thinking about food in a collaborative way, and the most efficient and effective way that I've found to get my diet and keep my diet in a pretty good space is spring cleaning the pantry. So keeping great healthy snacks handy and not having things in my house that I don't want to eat. So the flip side to that is only having in my house the things that I'm happy to eat. And I've found that that's been the most effective way for me. And in fact, being home and not having that chocolate snack table behind me has been incredibly helpful, because at work we have a bit of a treat table, and I'm an absolute sucker for that. So my home environment is much easier for me to stay on track. Acknowledging your achievements, understanding things that derail you, having a plan, and again, that pantry power I think is really important. Let's talk a little bit about supplements here. Personally, I would prefer that everybody could get everything they need from their diet, but I acknowledge that sometimes with particular health conditions or compliance can be difficult, or absorption of food might be difficult. There can be other health issues running alongside the MS as well, but sometimes supplements have their place. So I just want to talk a little bit about supplements. I'm sure that you're all across the vitamin D supplement side of things. Most neurologists will be addressing this with people with multiple sclerosis. There seems to be a link between vitamin D and MS, and that's strengthened by the association between sunlight and the risk of MS. So the further away from the equator a person lives, the higher the risk of MS. So for example, Tasmania has a higher risk of MS than Queensland here in Australia. So it is considered, MS is considered a disease of latitude. Vitamin D is stored in your body fat, so your body has a store of vitamin D. It's got lots of functions in the body. In many ways, it is considered similar to a hormone. It does regulate the immune function. It does protect brain function. It regulates certain levels of minerals, amongst other things. We're learning about it all the time. You can test your vitamin D level by a simple blood test. Obviously, in the summer in Australia, it's easier to get vitamin D than in the winter because we can get vitamin D from sunlight. Most, but not all studies have shown that a higher level of blood serum vitamin D correlates with a slower progression of MS and fewer new lesions in people who've got early symptoms of MS. So there was a large study of nurses in the US, and it appeared that the risk of developing MS was less for women who were taking a vitamin D supplement. As I mentioned, I'm sure your neurologists are having these discussions with you. Sunlight is the body's most effective source for getting active vitamin D via UVB rays. In Australia, obviously, we need to do this carefully because of the risk of skin cancer. So a general aim is for 15 minutes of sun on as much as your body as possible. So that means you've got to be as naked as you're comfortable to be, 3 to 5 times a week at a UV index of around 7. So that's a reasonably safe, and obviously all our skins are different, but that's a reasonably safe general guideline. So please apply your own common sense in there. So your skin will make about 10,000 international units of vitamin D after 30 minutes of full body sun exposure, which is a
pretty high dose of vitamin D. You can supplement during winter. Again, you do that in liaison with your GP or your neurologist that's keeping an eye on your blood vitamin D levels. When we go out in the sunshine, longer exposure doesn't produce more vitamin D, but it can increase your risk of skin cancer, so go carefully. If you expose a small area for more time, that doesn't work because once all the vitamin D in a given area of skin is made, and that's usually within 15 minutes or so, no more is made until that chemical in the skin is formed again, and that takes about a day. So that's why we want to go outside with quite a lot of skin exposed, 15 minutes on a UV7, not above, 3 to 5 times a week. And again, that's a guideline. Some of you will have darker skin, some will have fairer skin, and you'll need to have a think about what's the most effective way for you. Food sources of vitamin D are things like cod liver oil, oily fish, kippers, mackerel, salmon, tuna, sardines. Eggs have quite a bit of vitamin D, but there's only a small amount that we can obtain from a diet. So a study has shown that vitamin D and sunlight exposure together was more effective in having an effect in multiple sclerosis than vitamin D on its own. So there is some magic factor in sunlight over and above vitamin D, which we haven't yet worked out. So a little bit of sunlight, the right amount, it's like Goldilocks, you've got to get it just right, can be helpful, but please do this carefully. You can get a vitamin D tracker, which can be quite good, and here's the SunSmart app. Flax seeds can also be something that is worth considering supplementing. Okay, so you might use some flaxseed oil from a good source. You might also choose to use ground flax seeds because they have some beautiful lignans and phytoestrogens and things in them as well. So we've talked about the positive effects of omega-3s, and I have flaxseed oil in my fridge and I pop it on my cereal in the morning, in my salads, over my veggies, and I try to get a certain amount of flaxseed oil in each day because it's wonderfully anti-inflammatory, and it's healthy for all of us, is our current thinking. Vitamin Bs are always best taken as a group, so a multivitamin B, because they tend to act synergistically, they're better altogether. The reason why we're interested in them, they're easily obtained from a great whole food diet, but they're very good for energy production and a healthy myelin sheath and nervous system. One of the ones I would like to draw your attention to is vitamin B12 and also B9 or folate. They seem to be most important. They're required for our nervous system function and for DNA synthesis, but also B12 is required for, and this is an amino acid, homocysteine, to be converted into another amino acid called methionine. And we know that homocysteine is neurotoxic. We know that homocysteine is also associated with some other health issues. So we do want that conversion to take place. We do want to make sure we've got enough B12. If you are vegetarian, you are likely to be low in B12, and you will probably need to take some active measures to make sure you have sufficient B12. So B12 is also vital for the metabolism of fatty acids and the maintenance of myelin. So you can see why we particularly want to make sure you have good levels of B12. It does need what we call intrinsic factor, which is produced in your stomach, so that it can be absorbed. It needs also good stomach acid, good hydrochloric acid to be effective. So if you are on antacids or proton pump inhibitors, your B12 might be lower as well. So vegetarians and people on those medications might particularly want to look at their B12. And probiotics and the gut microbiome. This is a very interesting newish frontier in medicine. It's very early days. We do know that the gut is like a mini brain. Lots of neurotransmitters are produced in the gut, such as serotonin, which we think is your is your happy mind neurotransmitter and dopamine. And it's estimated that about 90% of your serotonin is actually made in your gut, which I must admit I was surprised to read when I read that a while ago. So our moods and our brain are strongly associated with the health of our gut and the bacteria in our gut and our microbiome. So our gut is doing so much more than digesting food. It's really fascinating. And there's growing evidence that shows that a stable and healthy gut microbiota is required for a proper functioning of the immune system. And there has been some studies with MS and probiotics, and there would appear at a glance to be some dysbiosis or some imbalance in the gut microbiota for people who've got MS. So again, it's very early days, and a wonderful researcher from Deakin University, Dr. Wolfgang Marx, has done a specific webinar on this, which you can get from the MS webinar library, and he is investigating the differences in gut bacteria in people with MS. So that will be interesting to see what Wolfgang discovers in that. So at the moment, I would recommend keeping your gut bacteria as healthy as possible. Perhaps you might like to take a probiotic, or perhaps you might like to include some wonderful probiotic foods such as sauerkraut or kimchi and natural yogurt, and keeping your sugar as low as possible because that feeds the unhealthy bacteria and contributes to the dysbiosis. Antibiotics are life-saving, but just using them discerningly, and most GPs are very cautious about how they prescribe antibiotics, but obviously they have an effect on the bacteria in our gut as well. CoQ10 is also another supplement that some people like to consider. It is antioxidant and can help with depression and fatigue, and nothing conclusive, but it may help in those areas. Ursolic acid is found predominantly in the peel of apples. This was from a study in Science Daily, just published recently in April 2020, so it's very early days. But it's looking like ursolic acid may slow the damage and help with neuronal repair. So we're interested in this. It's also found in basil and cranberry, peppermint, thyme, rosemary and oregano. So maybe get eating your apples with the skin on and include those beautiful herbs in your cooking, and that may help too. Now, fasting and ketogenic diets is another interesting area. It's definitely not for everybody. So obviously, if you're underweight, diabetic, pregnant, I would not recommend fasting at all. So if you're any of those things, plus some other things, I'm sure, tune out at the moment. But there is some evidence that occasional fasting is good for the brain. In general, periods of fasting show that we can increase brain cell activity, and it also, most interestingly, promotes the growth of new brain cells and encourages repair. So there's lots of different ways you can fast. At the moment, one of the most popular ways of fasting is periodically, so from time to time, going without food for 16 hours. So for some people, that's stopping eating at 7 o'clock at night and not eating again until 11 o'clock in the morning, and doing this from time to time. There's no hard and fast rules here. And again, I would strongly encourage, if you're thinking of doing this, speak to your doctor, and do be mindful if you've got any other pre-existing conditions that may not lend itself to this type of fasting. So in summary, I would like to encourage you all to ensure that you've got adequate vitamin D levels and do that via a blood test. And then if you need topping up, top up with sunlight and supplements. Enjoy a fantastic anti-inflammatory diet with that rainbow of vegetables and fruit and fish. Enjoy plenty of omega-3s from flaxseed oil, not the whole flax seeds, flaxseed oil and some ground flax seeds, walnuts and oily fish. And look after your gut microbiome by eating fermented foods, limiting sugar, and being sensible about your use of antibiotics. I've found in terms of behavior change, for many people, it can help to set a goal. And when we're setting a goal, making sure that it's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. So for me, the biggest way I can achieve my goals is making sure it's achievable. So going for less rather than being over ambitious, and then you get that reward and that sense of achievement, and it's little steps have been shown to actually help us achieve our end goals better. So getting to know yourself and looking at what your obstacles are and trying to address those obstacles and working carefully with behavior change. So I wish you all really well with making some dietary changes or reinforcing your commitment to some of the changes you've already made. And I hope that some of the information here has been helpful to start you thinking. It's the start of a conversation really about nutrition. It's an ongoing conversation. And bear in mind that information around nutrition will change. It's a very dynamic and at times controversial and at times conflicting field. So it's very interesting. Annie, have we got any more questions?
Yes, Nick, some more questions have come through. One from Cynthia about full-fat yogurt. Cynthia has heard that they make low-fat yogurt. By making low-fat yogurt, they use more sugar in the process. So which is better, low-fat?
Yeah, you have to be an investigator here and you have to read the labels.
In a way.
You do, yeah. And then once you find a brand that ticks your boxes, then it's easy. You just go back and buy that same one. So with, yes, I think low-fat natural yogurt is great. As soon as they start putting fruits and things in it, they usually add in sugar. So you've just simply got to read on the label how much sugar is in your yogurt. Pick up a good natural yogurt and compare it. And really, you just want the natural yogurt.
Of course. Okay, Marianne has written in to say that she uses coconut ghee rather than the milk. And she finds that that's really helpful. Susan's also mentioned that she uses tahini as a great substitute for spreading on bread. Rather.
Great point, Susan. And I love tahini because it's the highest source of calcium. So people, when they're cutting down on their dairy, are often concerned about the amount of calcium they get. And we can get calcium easily from other sources. And tahini is one of my favorites. And so that's ground sesame seeds.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
One of my favorite breakfasts is toast, tahini, honey, and banana.
Oh, that sounds delicious. Okay, Catherine's asked the question, what is the best diet for disabling fatigue or managing with fatigue?
That's a really big question, Catherine, isn't it? So what we want are steady blood sugar levels. So we want moderate and low glycemic index. So you really got to cut the sugar out. I think the best diet is everything that we've said today, going back and looking at those traffic lights, looking at, as I say, managing your sugar levels, enjoying some really great walnuts and flaxseed and great protein. And then we've got a webinar coming up, actually that's for health professionals, but we've got recorded webinars on managing fatigue and we've got the Facets program. So there's lots of different layers to managing fatigue in MS, whilst acknowledging that it is an incredibly debilitating for many people and difficult to manage area. But the Facets program covers a lot of things about managing fatigue, not just diet and exercise, which is really important, but also about our thinking and the emotional component with managing fatigue. So I'd encourage you, Catherine, and anybody else who's listening who is
grappling with fatigue to have a look at our online facets program, and also some of our recorded webinars in that area, because there's some great and important pacing tips, etc. But a healthy diet is certainly going to be a really important part of that.
Yes, that's very true. Thank you, Nick. Maria's asking, is decaf coffee suitable?
There is just nothing perfect in this world, Maria, because decaf coffee can be really nice in that it's not too much of a stimulant, but then some of the ways that the coffee is decaffeinated with the chemicals that are used are not great either. So I'm a real middle of the road person, and I like to think, enjoy a cup of really good coffee how you like it, and don't have too many of them. You know, if you've got 3 cups a day now, really savor and mindfully enjoy the 1 cup that you have instead. There's no perfect there.
Yes, that sounds like a good plan. Moderation is the key.
It is.
Caroline's asking about Sustagen. She takes Sustagen regularly and is asking if that's any good for her.
I don't know, Caroline, because I don't know your medical history or why you're taking Sustagen. I'm not totally across everything that's in Sustagen. I don't know how much sugars and things are in it. So I don't feel able to really offer any personal recommendations there. I would suggest that perhaps you phone our MS Connect nurses and talk to them in a little bit more detail.
Okay, great. Thanks, Nick. Vistine is talking about a study that was carried out by the University of Newcastle, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, Nick, but it gave participants a particular cocktail of supplements to their diet to see if it had any effect on MS progression. And he's asking if that information is available. I'm suggesting that it's probably available online if he wanted to look for that.
Yeah, I'm happy to have a look. I'm not across that study, Christine, but I'm happy to look it up and email you directly some feedback on that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Jasleen is saying that she does enjoy 3 standard drinks a day. Are we talking alcoholic drinks, Jasleen? I'm not sure. And she's asking for a comment on that.
Yeah.
So maybe Jasleen wants to clarify that.
Yeah, that sounds at a glance a lot. And we should always have a number of alcohol-free days in a week. And again, that's very personal. So again, I think I would ask you to give MS Connect a call, Jasleen, and talk about what's happening there and why and what the drivers are and what might be a healthy, supportive way going forward. Yeah.
All right, great. Thanks, Nick. We have got some other comments that have come through. A fair few of you have said thank you to Nick for the information and the presentation, and that you found it very informative. So that's really great. Before we finish off, we've got about 5 minutes to go. I just wanted to finish off with some final slides regarding our services. So Nick, I'm just going to take control for a moment.
Beautiful. And if I can just say thank you everybody for listening, and if you do have any other questions, please just email education@ms.org.au and I'll answer them personally as best I can, but I can't provide personal specific information because that's not appropriate and I don't know your medical background, but general nutritional information I'm more than happy to provide more specific information if anybody wants it. So thanks again, and really good luck out there with making some fantastic changes to your diet and really enjoying it and reaping the benefits to that. So bye for now, guys.
Thanks, Nick. So just with the MS Connect line, just letting you know that that's our gate line to all our services, and that number is 1800 042 138. And also you can contact them by sending through an email to msconnect@ms.org.au. And listed on the screen there are various reasons that you may want to contact MS Connect. There are many reasons to contact them, but you can see there that you can get some help with managing your symptoms, or if you're newly diagnosed, or if you have any questions about your treatment options, they're certainly there to help you. This slide talks about the peer support program, so that we provide support for people one-on-one. And there are also face-to-face groups, but they're currently converted to telegroups given the current climate. There are also Facebook groups, so there are many ways that you can keep in touch with others who are living with MS, and you can share your experiences and have someone to talk to regarding that. This slide talks about an online tool on our website. It's called Get Your Act Together, and it deals with the symptoms of MS. And you can plug in your information, and it provides you with a detailed and specific personalised report for you to help you manage with your symptoms, and that's available on our website. Just a word on the employment support services that is still currently operating at this time. All our support services team members are working from home and assisting you to either stay in your current role or help you, assist you in maintaining your symptoms or managing your symptoms while you're in your role. And to access them, you would call the MS Connect line with that number there on the screen. MS is a registered NDIS provider in the various states, and listed there on the screen are the services that we are providing you with. And just a word on the face-to-face programs. They're either converted to online programs or they've been postponed for the time being, given the current COVID situation that we're experiencing at the moment. If this applies to you, My Aged Care, it's available for information or for mapping out your needs or for further supports. And you can ring the 1-800 number there on the screen, or you can access them through the website. So all our services are available through our MS Connect line, and that number again is 1-800 042 138. And the email msconnect@ms.org.au. And we're just on 12 o'clock, so we'll finish up there. And as Nicola said, if we haven't gotten to your question, we will endeavour to respond as soon as possible. And Nicola, I can see there that Joanne, Cynthia, Kim, Lisa, Janelle have all said thank you very much. And I'd like to thank you for presenting today. It was very informative and certainly a lot of information there to remember. And if you do have any further questions, the MS Connect line is there available for you. So thank you everyone for joining us, and I hope you're keeping well at this during the COVID crisis. Take care, and we hope to see you online again soon. Thanks very much. Bye for now.